Good afternoon, everybody. I think we should start. I welcome you to this workshop on how can the voices of people experiencing poverty influence democratic processes. So this is a topic which is concerned more with politics in a more narrow sense of the term. This morning we had interesting and stimulating contributions about some of the broader economic and global factors affecting poverty, marginalization, and discrimination. The aim of this workshop is to explore the relationships between universal human rights, democratic processes, and continuing poverty and social inequality. In doing so, it takes a view from below, so to speak, by bringing together representatives of groups who belong to those most affected by poverty, marginalization, and discrimination. In this respect, we are faced with a paradox. In Europe, human rights are officially recognized and protected by legal procedures. Similarly, the existing democratic processes should ensure that all voices, including those of groups affected by poverty and forms of discrimination, are heard equally and taken into account by appropriate legislation. Yet, strong social inequalities have persisted over a long period of time and have further increased during the present financial and economic crisis. In a number of countries, partly as a result of this process, forms of social discrimination, xenophobia, racism, and other populist reactions have increased as well. This also affects specific minorities and migrants. This paradox must be overcome, or at least substantially alleviated, if European democracies are to persist in a meaningful sense. How can the voices of the poor and affected minorities be made more effective in this regard? How can various groups learn from each other in mobilizing their members and gaining outside support? Which forms of collective action are most effective obtaining broader social and political recognition? How can the new social media be used for this purpose? Do we need more direct forms of political participation and democracy? How can these be reconciled with the existing representative institutions at different levels, the local, the regional, the national, and the European one? These are some of the questions which will be raised and about which we should share our experiences and views. And you have had in your bag the guide which was prepared for this conference, and in the guide you will find at least two chapters, chapter 2 and 3 of part 2, which also address these questions and which, serve as a kind of background for our workshop today. And if you have not had a chance to read it, probably not, it will help you to remind you of some of the issues which have been raised here and also some of the possible propositions as they were just presented by Alessandra in the plenary concerning, more active forms of involvement to make the voices of the most affected groups heard much better. I need not introduce the speakers very much. You have all received this little leaflet where you do have some biographical information. So I prefer to save time, in order to save time, to move right away to some of our speakers here. They all represent a diversity of groups affected by poverty, inequality, discrimination. So in this respect, we all can, I think, learn from each other, sharing such experiences, but also some of the possibilities which present themselves in order to possibly overcome some of that, at least as much as possible. So we will start with Ternura Rojas on my far right. She is a representative of the Indignados movement in Spain, of which probably all of you have heard, and you have probably seen pictures on TV and similar occasions where the Indignados have voiced their indignation and protest, not just against the Spanish government, but even beyond, I believe. And so it's, we are all concerned of these things going on. Each speaker will have roughly 10 minutes to present his or her view and his or her particular organization, which will leave us sufficient time to then open the floor to have a discussion amongst ourselves and then come to some concluding statements at the end. Okay? So, Ternura, would you please start?
First of all, I don't represent the Occupy movement because we are not an organization, we will never be an organization. And we will, Okie dokie. Now, thank you. So I was saying I don't represent the Occupy movement. It's not an organization. It's something different. We will talk about it later if we have time. Thank you. Well, I was invited here to talk about how can the poor can participate of democratic processes. But I'm sorry to say that you should show me first and demonstrate me first that all the countries, absolutely all of them in the Union, have democracy. You would have to, well, we are not here to discuss that either. We will leave it like that. I will leave you some questions. But please just try to, I don't know, try to challenge yourselves and the system and see if in your country you have total and absolute clean access to democracy. Before you, then we will talk about poor people, okay? And I think some of the people on the table is coming to talk about immigrants and, people in disadvantage from long ago. I came to bring attention here to the elderly and also the students, because they are in great danger of falling into poverty, at least in Spain, okay? You see this is from 2010. Students in the UK had to sell their bodies to pay the debt of their studies. 2010. So what we have here is all this population. This is from 2011, the population of Europe in ages. You have it from 25 to 65. This is the people that work and live and eat. All these people is in danger of falling into poverty, because of the crisis. And we want them to vote, to participate. We also want to make poor people to participate. Let's see how we can do it, convince them to do so. And I don't know if all of you are familiar with this. Is the motivation hierarchy of needs? Who is not aware of this yet? Okay. So where would you, well, probably I will do an introduction for those who don't know what it is. Abraham Maslow, back in 1943, made this scheme that shouldn't be accurate. It's only a way to show us something, okay? It's not absolutely the truth or anything like that. But it's a way to represent the motivation of human beings, okay? Below everything, you have your physiological needs. You need to eat, to drink, and not even to have clothes on you. Only, to have, sex is also there. Then above that, you have safety needs. That is when you need a roof on top of you to be sure, to feel sure, okay? Or live in a neighborhood, in a safe neighborhood where no one is going to rape your daughter or at least not an early age, okay? Then there is the belonging needs. When you satisfy the two below, you start thinking about where I am, who I am, who is the people around me, do they love me, you know? And then you get the next step, the esteem needs. Well, it's self-esteem, but it's also esteem to the environment. You start thinking about, okay, I'm fine because I have these three below me, and now what I'm going to do onwards. And above all is the self-actualization. It depends on the cultural and social background of the people. Starting a career could be in the esteem needs level or the self-actualization, because there is people that struggle so much that they have to sell their bodies to pay for the debt of their studies, that it would be on the top of the motivation, okay? So, where would you put voting in this hierarchy of needs? Taking into account that, for example, we are here talking about the poor, we want to help them. If you lost your wallet and your passport on your way to this building, would you be here? Your motivation is over. You would be in the embassy of your country looking for a way to go back home. You wouldn't be here anymore because all your motivation drops. Your security needs are not satisfied. You cannot think of doing something else for someone else, okay? So let's put, for example, voting there in the belonging needs. Why? Because most people have the feeling of belonging when they vote for their political party. Doesn't matter if the political party does good or wrong. It's the political party. In Spain, it's because party is the same word as football match. So they mix it up, and it's my party, you know, and they try politics like football, normal people, okay? So voting maybe should be above that, saying, okay, I'm going to make a huge decision here, I'm going to use my right for the future of my country, okay? So if I'm going to do something good. But if we put voting there, we have a problem. Because if poor people cannot even satisfy the basic, stage of their needs, how are they going to think about voting? Some countries have solved this problem by putting fines on their citizens who don't vote, or having the laws to imprison them. If you don't vote in Peru, you are going to prison, okay? That is how you put the voting motivation down there. Probably with education, we should be, you know, we wouldn't have to threaten someone with prison to make them vote. And it would be ideal to put voting down there, because if you see it, all things related to citizens' welfare are there. So if you decide really early in your motivation what is going on in your country, you will have access and be more likely to satisfy your safety needs and your belonging needs and all the rest, okay? So please, well, probably it would be great if we, finish this workshop knowing how to do this all together. In the meantime, if you want to take this shortcut, what we have to do to get rid of poverty is to go for the universal income guarantee. I'm not going to talk about that because tomorrow we have the workshop there. We will solve all these problems. But going back to, do we live in a democracy? Don't you think it's a little bit funny that 14 countries are being organized to start this plebiscite or referendum in the European Union to approve the unconditional income guarantee, but no bank or no one had to put that process to work to get the bailouts of banks. 17 billion euros were spent in bailouts of banks, and nobody asked us. And now we're saying that we have to ask ourselves if we want to get the basic income guarantee. Is this a democracy? Because they should have asked us in that way also about bailing out banks, don't we? Because it's money that we spent on us, supposedly. So let's go back to universal income guarantee. My theory, my personal theory, is that it's going to get, well, probably, we would get rid of economic poverty. That is good. But real poverty is more than that, much more than that. Those who are French know the story about Nina, don't you? Nina is a girl that was consistently raped by an average of 15 guys weekly during years. She and her friends in a neighborhood in Paris. That the poverty around that is not only economical, it's something really bigger. So if we solve the basic income guarantee, probably we will have time to address this real poverty that is even more dangerous and more harmful to society. So we would solve one tiny problem, which is economic poverty, and we would be able probably to address other poverties. That's my hope. And my hope and those of all these institutions and initiatives around the world that want the same that we want, to make people vote, not only poor people, also normal people. And but the problem of, these representative institutions, this question that how this can be reconciled with existing representative institutions, this is really dangerous, I think, because once more, questioning democracy. I don't feel represented when my country decides to invade Afghanistan or Iraq or Mali recently. So they don't represent me. They represent me when they do something nice, but not anymore. So think about it. Does your country or your institution really represent you? Because it's for good and for bad as well. Are you the ones who are sending soldiers to Mali? Are you the ones who are selling guns to countries that use children soldiers? I come from Spain. Spain does that. I'm not that person. I am absolutely not that person, really. So the problem is that this is the labyrinth that we have to, endure to get to places. This is how people feel in front of institutions like the Council of Europe, the European Commission, their governments, any office. We have to cut that circuit, probably with the universal income guarantee, I don't know, probably, if they manage, but with the cultural nuances of every country, okay? It's not going to be homogeneous for everyone. This is another girl, this is another TED. Oh, yes, sorry. Well, what I was going to say, concrete measures to solve this would be, for example, the universal income guarantee, the 21 hours work week, for example, to, be able to share the work. And this last one. We want to destigmatize the strategies that fight poverty, but I don't really feel the need, because whoever feels ashamed or afraid of a poor person, the problem is in them. It's not on us. We are working, we're doing something. So whenever somebody says, okay, you are a perro flauta, they call it dirty hippies, the Occupy movement. Yes, I'm proud to be a perro flauta, of course, because at least I'm doing something. People who do nothing, they shouldn't. They shouldn't complain at all. Because, if you feel like this, the way I feel, how can we help them, the poor, if we cannot, overcome that barrier ourselves for our own good? Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Ternura. We will continue with an issue which you also touched upon, namely, the role and the dignity of women in particular. And we have two representatives here. One, Jeto, from the All-African Women's Group in London, and Cristel, who is here, from the Black Women's Rape Action project, and they will tell you what their organizations are about and what we can learn from their experiences.
I think I can stay here.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, all of you. I am representing a group of women who are women asylum seekers based in London. These women are women who have come to the end of their asylum claims, who have been refused, who are destitute, who have nowhere to go, who don't have anything to feed on, who are really in a very bad shape. I happen to be one member of this group before I got my status, and I also experienced what these women are experiencing now. But this is what we do in this group, resurrecting cases that have died and giving women hope that has been lost. I managed to be aware of this group when I was in detention. I stayed in Yarrowswood for the shortest, I was there for a short time. I stayed there for almost a month. And when I was released, I joined this group because they helped me in detention. We are speaking that has the present crisis exacerbated this situation? My answer is yes. The situation is really getting worse because of the following reasons. In the last meeting, we meet every other 2 weeks, and we have a group of like coming to 50, 60, 40 women every time we meet. And this time we wanted to know how many women are really destitute, because there are people who are destitute, and there are those who are on nurse support that is also not enough. But a quarter, I mean, 3/4 of the women, I mean, yeah, 1/3 of the women are destitute. And what does this mean? When 3/4 of women with their children are destitute. There is a lot that goes with this. There is domestic violence. Women are being abused and violated against because they can't report what is happening to them to the police because they fear they will be arrested there because they don't have cases in the home office. Women are working. They are doing like slavery work. Women are being exploited in people's homes. Women are sleeping from one house to another. Every day they are looking for where to put their heads. Women are sleeping on buses in A&E. Of recent, one woman was beaten by his boyfriend. Bitterly, she was really battered. But because she knew this group, she had the courage to report the boyfriend. But not every woman does that. They fear, and more especially women who are not aware that there are such groups that can help them. And with the help of BRAP, despite the risks, she reported this man to the police, and he's waiting for a court hearing. Other women are being raped, trying to get where to live, and men abuse them. They are being raped in temporary accommodations. People come saying they are case workers because they are desperate. They don't have anybody to look at their cases. And the man comes in as a case worker and does whatever they want. They do whatever they want to do to the women. This woman was raped by a man who disguised himself as a caseworker. And he used all of the girls in the hostel. And when this woman reported him, because the other girls refused to give evidence, and he gave money to one woman who acted as a witness to him, and he was got off. He was not penalized. So this is what is happening to women. And another thing that is really making the situation worse is the legal aid that is being cut. Women don't have lawyers to represent them. And how can you do your case when you don't have any representation, any representative? And I mean, seeking asylum is a right. We run away for our lives. And it's a right, it's a human right. I don't know. But the governments are taking away that right. They are not giving us, allowing us to hear our cases. And, you know, women are being deported to countries where they're going to die, where they're going to suffer. And the bad thing is that these women that are sent back, nobody bothers to know what happens to them. We happen to be in touch with some women who went back, who were forced to go back, and they're not in good shape. Some of the women, we help in fundraising money to put food on their tables. And they've been raped, and they've had babies who they don't know their fathers. The cut of child care, for example, women don't have GPs, children can't get treatments. So that's what is really happening at this moment in time. And how can the voices, how is the voice of the group being heard? All African Women's Group is a self-help group. And the main thing we do is we speak out. We speak out in every place we can get. I've been speaking out since 2006. I was given status I claimed asylum in 2002. And I was given status outside immigration rules in 2010. The status I was given, I wasn't allowed to have a family reunion. And I had left my 3 children in a very hostile place. I had to fight again for another year to get a refugee status. And the only reason I did that, the only way I managed to do that is because I had legal aid. I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done it without legal aid. I wouldn't have done it without the support of the groups I work with. And after 10 years, the judge ruled in my favor. And I have my children now. It's 1 year. And there's nothing really, as all of you who are parents or mothers, or you all have families, there's nothing good like having your children with you. I didn't know I would see them again. So that's what we do. And when I was struggling with to bring my children back, I launched a campaign for mothers, a family reunion campaign for mothers to be with their children, despite any status they give you. And it's the campaign that is going on. Many mothers have gained the right to be with their children. So far, 6 mothers have been reunited with their children. And that's what we do. We shout, we talk where it's necessary. We go to the media, we go to House of Commons. We do everything that we can to be heard, because we are just a small number and nobody seems to know, nobody seems to care. Unless we shout, unless we talk, there isn't much that is going to be done. And all this we've been doing with other groups at the center, like Black Women's Rape Action Project. We have Law Action for Women. We have Law Action for Women, Women Against Rape, Single Women, and that are invisible. And we work with other groups like Movement for Justice, Medical Justice. These are the groups that really help in stop deportation and visiting people in detentions. And another question is how to destigmatize strategies that fight poverty in order to recognize the dignity of every person. Women are exposing sexism, racism we suffer by speaking out about what we have been through and connecting with other struggles of different sectors, and with other sectors, different sectors that are making. We are fighting for each entitlement to the same resources. We are told there is no money. We are squanders. But once people hear the truth about your situations, wealth of Western world built on the theft from Africa and other continents, and our people over centuries through slavery and colonialism still going on, multinationalism, stealing oil, land, all sorts of minerals, etc. And when we speak, we show people how we are being pitted against each other, that the government is using the same arguments to implement the cuts on the poorest society that we used implement the cuts on the poorest in the society that they used against asylum seekers. We find ways we can work together, e.g., many of our members have joined other actions, protests against austerity cuts, like fuel poverty action. Our members are part of this group, fuel poverty action, because women are given these keys for electricity and gas, which is very, very expensive, because they can't have contracts, they can't have to pay in bulk, but then they can't afford, they even don't have the penny to put in for gas, and it's freezing cold. Women are staying cold with no food, with no heating, and they have babies. And those who can afford putting heat, then they won't be able to feed the children. Children go hungry. So this is what is happening. Yeah. Another thing is that they're putting in this law that if you have to be reunited with your family, you have to have the 26,000 some money per year. I think this is a way of really eliminating a certain group of people, because not even many people can earn that in this normal way, normal wages. And another thing I wanted to say is that London is really doing the ethnic cleansing. They are pushing the low-income people from London and sending them out of London. And most of these people are the ethnic minority. And most of those people have the people who have just got their status, who don't have anything. And the only support they have has been in London. That's why they can go to friends. That's when they can go to charities where they get food. But when they are pushed outside London in a new area, I don't know what is going to happen to these people. This is what we are facing. Anyway, I think I have to stop there, but yeah. And I should say that there are some MPs who are really very good. We have John McDonald, who puts our issues on early morning motion, and they are discussed. And I have one MP who helped me with the visa of my child who was going to turn 18, and he really helped me get his visa. Some MPs or politicians can help when you approach them. Thank you.
Well, with this somewhat more hopeful note, we come to Cristel, who is also working in a parallel organization to what Jeto was just presenting here.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I wanted to develop a little bit what Jeto raised about self-help, because it's absolutely crucial to how, whoever we are, and wherever we're from, it's crucial to getting justice, because it begins, first of all, by we inform ourselves of what our rights are. Two of the things that we produced, which really work for that, and which is being updated right now, is the self-help guide for asylum seekers and their supporters, and Justice is Your Right guide for survivors of rape and sexual assault. Once you know what your rights are, your possibilities are broadened. Obviously, they're in English. We try also to get them into other languages. But the people who use these, women in detention, have managed to turn themselves into what we call jailhouse lawyers. They've read books like this, they've found out, they've gone to the library, and they've managed to get their colleagues out of detention. One simple example was a woman from Somalia who was effectively stateless because the British government denied she was Somalian, and yet they couldn't say she was from anywhere else that would take ownership of her. And once you're inside in that situation, she was there for about 8 months. Because she didn't speak any English, she literally had to wait for another woman who could speak her language. When she found that woman, this woman had this guide and got her out instantly. And she's now gone on to make a claim for unlawful detention. And in our experience, that is really going to be one of the ways to bring any of the authorities to account, is to demand compensation for what we've been through. Not because simply and only because of the money, but because that's the only thing that makes an acknowledgement that you suffered an injustice. If they have to pay thousands of pounds, if the immigration authorities have to pay thousands of pounds, that also begs questions in terms of transparency of what is happening to money. Where is the money that we're creating actually going? Is it going into paying for people who've been wrongly treated? So those were a couple of little examples. The other thing I wanted to say is people know it's bad. I'm not going to tell you anything different. But another way in which we've been able to win things is again to speak to what the government is trying to bring through as policies which are discriminatory, which are racist, which are sexist, which are whatever. And you need young people on your side about that. And I wanted to read you a letter which was recently published in The Guardian, because it speaks to what Jeto was raising about the theft of people and resources from other parts of the world that mean that people from there come to Europe. This is a young girl who's a history student, and she says that until last year, when I was 17, my main criticism of the syllabus is that what it taught me left me clueless about the global impact of British colonial rule, apart from a few smug lines in a textbook about Victoria ruling the waves. Michael Gove, our education minister, tried to whitewash some of British history by getting rid of part of the syllabus that described the activities, the extraordinary activities of a black nurse called Mary Seacole. Mary Seacole came from Jamaica, worked in the Crimea War, and had a history of saving British soldiers' lives. But you don't hear about her, you hear about Florence Nightingale. And when he had tried to do that, the next thing that happened is there was a massive petition launched which gathered, I think, 50 or 60,000 signatures. He did a U-turn, and Mary Seacole is back on our history syllabus. So collectively, we can change things. Collectively, we can identify what are our priorities. Our priorities at our Women's Centre, where there are 15 different groups, including a men's group, is caring. We want to invest in caring. We want the money that is generated by wealth not to go to the wars or the bankers, but to come to those of us who are reproducing the whole of society and taking care of it. That's a big demand. But that's where we start. That's what we want to win. And we want to win it because when you don't have a perspective of caring for populations, then 1,200 people, elderly people, can die in a Staffordshire hospital and nobody is brought to account for that. So when we talk about caring as our priority, and when we say that life is more important, we have a whole other perspective in which we can fight, no matter where we're from, who we are, what our particular things are. We can connect with people who have disabilities. We can connect with asylum seekers. If we are about a second and third generation black and immigrant people to be treated in the same way that they began to treat asylum seekers and get away with it, if we're white working class people and we're about to be dispersed out of London as Jeto described, and they get away with it because nobody speaks out, we're all fighting against the same austerity, and it's Europe-wide and it's global. And I really think that one of our jobs here, and what I really hope will happen, is that people here will want to connect with each other, whether we're going to use Facebook, whether we're going to use texting, whatever means we can use to come together, to be part of Occupy, to be part of the Indignados, to be part of Slutwalk, to be part of the movements that are springing up and saying, enough, we want a different kind of world. And I warmly invite anybody who's in London to come to Kentish Town and join Jeto and myself and our other members and have a very nice meal. Thank you.
Thank you, Cristel. We now come to a very different context, and many of us probably think that, well, Denmark and the other Scandinavian countries are a kind, at least relatively speaking, a kind of paradise for everyone. But as we will see, we have Rune Kamstrup here, who represents the Council of Marginalized People in Denmark, which is a special organization, and he will tell you what his organization is about and with which problems he is concerned.
Thank you, Dirk, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to share with you some Danish experiences on the subject of how the voices of people experiencing poverty can influence democratic process. I'm from an organization that tries to give voice to marginalized people. Whether we succeed is up to debate, but at least it's an effort. Let me start by saying a little about the poverty situation in Denmark, as Dirk also touched upon. As the rest of the European countries, poverty measured by the OECD poverty line has been rising in Denmark in the last decade. In September 2012, 200,000 of the 5.5 million Danes live below the line, and 105,000 people experiencing long-term poverty. That's more than 3 years below the line. Deducting students from the group, they have a special grant or the opportunity to receive a grant in Denmark. 62,000 individuals are experiencing long-term poverty in Denmark on a daily basis, suffering really material deprivation. So there you have it. Some of these individuals have multiple social problems and is not benefiting from the traditional social and health services, education, employment, and so on. And these are some of the most vulnerable people in society, and our organization speaks on their behalf as their national amplifier. The Council has a recognized advisory function in relation to all matters regarding marginalized people. So to the question of has the crisis made it worse off for these people, there's also in Denmark a definite yes to that. The crisis has made these individuals worse off. They're even further away from the labor market. Municipalities are cutting down their social assistance, sometimes without warning. But moreover, they are discriminated and stigmatized politically and in the media for being lazy and not willing to take a job at all, thereby indicating that they brought on the poverty themselves. It's their own fault, and it couldn't be further away from the truth, to my mind. The Council for Socially Marginalized People is their voice, and so are many other Danish NGOs. One positive example, and one maybe to be copied on a European level, is giving or setting up local councils like this, and they represent people of homeless people, drug addicts, mentally ill, and so on. And a positive story from Denmark is that since 2007, 20 of the 98 municipalities have set up these councils, and they function as local guard dogs, barking when budgets are cut and when urban plans exclude them, and when shelters and drop-in centers are closed. And they are a valuable platform for influence, and should be implemented, in our mind, by legislation. They are not now, but we hope to. I'm not afraid to argue that we have moved in Denmark from a welfare state to a competition state. Social policy in Denmark has become more right-wing orientated, and that leads poor people to turn their back on society. Just to give you an example, in 2009, the voting percent in the municipality level elections was all in all 70% in Denmark. Among people on social assistance, it was down to 32%, and that percentage has declined ever since. So I don't know, Ternura, you mentioned that people should be imprisoned if they do not vote. I do not suggest that, but something has to be done to voice or to make also the poor people to make them give their voice also in the elections. What we're doing now is certainly just turning them even more away from society, and one thing could be to establish these local councils that pool all their needs and views upon different levels and articulate that politically. That's one way of putting it. I think I'll stop now, just to make it short.
Okay, thank you, Rune. We now come to, again, quite different context. And Ilona Tomova from the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences will share some of her and the Bulgarian, but not only Bulgarian, experiences about the Roma minority in Bulgaria, but also in the Czech Republic, where she had been working and done some research. And well, the Roma were mentioned several times this morning by the speakers. They have they are a specific group, difficult to define, with a difficult kind of identity, but which, and you also have in your map or in your bag, or you could at least take a leaflet about the situation of the Roma in 11 different European countries. And so it's a cross-national kind of situation, and Ilona will tell us about that particular group.
I'm not able to speak about Roma in both countries, so I took a decision, having in mind that I have less than 10 minutes, to concentrate on my and my colleagues' experience in studying the good models of Roma integration in 3 countries. What we found out in Czech Republic. In comparison to other Central and Eastern European countries, the Czech Republic is considered one of the most advanced countries of the former socialist camp. It is probably the only one which successfully combated absolute poverty, including that among Roma, in the post-socialist period. At the same time, the Czech Republic is among the countries with the highest institutional discrimination against Roma. According to the data from the 2009 International Comparative Study on Discrimination of Minorities, 64% of the Czech Roma declared that they felt discriminated against on several occasions. We worked in Ostrava, the 3rd largest city of the Czech Republic. After the Second World War, a significant number of Roma from Slovakia arrived in the city to occupy the vacant places in mining and metallurgy. According to the experts' estimations, their number varies greatly, between 22 and 40,000 people. The number of Roma suffering social exclusion in the town is estimated at 6,000 people. Well, the closure of mines and processing factories during the 1990s left the majority of Roma jobless and without significant social role. Local people began to see them as immigrants and parasites on welfare system, and inter-ethnic relations were inflamed. Cases of violence against Roma at schools, in the street, at home, or in the public places became common practice. In the city, there are several powerful Roma non-governmental organizations. They initiated a number of cases against Czechoslovakia and its successor states for gross violation of basic human rights. The case of sterilization of Roma women during socialism, the case for school segregation, the case for mass enrolling of Roma children in schools and classes for children with mental disabilities. Also because of their struggle, in 2009, Ostrava adopted a comprehensive program and action plan for social inclusion of Roma in the period 2011-2020. Experts from the European Commission, the United Nations, the World Bank, national and regional experts, the team of the mayor of Ostrava, and several non-governmental organizations participated in the preparation of this final draft of both strategic documents. The ambitious goal of the team was to turn the program and the action plan into the European model for integration of socially excluded communities, and to Ostrava to become a pilot project for the social inclusion of Roma people. And this program and this action plan are really designed very professionally. The European Commission, the Czech government, and the city of Ostrava came to an agreement to allocate impressive amount of European structural funds and other foreign investments in order to achieve the objectives set out in the program. Just to mention, it's around 18 million euro from the European funds through the operational program for human resources for finding the activities envisaged in the section support for the social integration of Roma communities, and much more money for the housing problems of Roma. I was not able to find out what is the exact number of this money, but just to give you an example, for the small neighborhood of Vitkovice, where 270 people Roma live, European Union allocated some 18 million euro for the first 3 years for the resolving of their housing issues. So who benefited the most from the program for resident integration? First of all, a few words, where did Roma live and why it became so necessary to start this program? Well, the first wave of Roma in the late 1940s were accommodated in the city center houses abandoned by the Germans after the expulsion from the country in the wake of the World War II. After that, the second wave, in the 50s, transport, mining, and metal processing enterprises built housing units for the employers and their families, and many Roma have rented them for decades. The majority of these houses were not repaired for at least 30 years, so their condition very quickly became really very bad. This made possible for for some representatives of the local economic and political elite to privatize these housings for a very cheap amount of money in the last 10-15 years. The new owners used various means to get rid of tenants Roma. They changed permanent contracts to short-term ones and subsequently resumed them. They increased the rents. They constantly abuse the privacy of the tenants. They impose fines on them on any occasion and use political pressure to force local governments to make policy decisions and to change local laws on behalf of the new owners. Such a policy was the provision of one-way airplane tickets to Canada to 6,000 Roma who lived in the central part of the city by the municipality of Ostrava on condition that they refused to apply for public housing anymore. The truth is that the mayor's wife became the principal owner of these houses after the privatization in this time. A lot of legal measures were taken that affected badly the need of social housing. Of course, the municipal social housing decreased a lot after the privatization. So local municipality the first its act was to consign the municipal houses to private individuals and companies for management and use. And as the municipality pays the rents, and the rents were really very high, the local people became frustrated and say, well, look at this Roma, they all the time drain our sources. No one mentioned that all this money go into the pockets of these private persons and companies. After that, they made another change. It is, well, they said that now the applicants for social housing must show that they have permanent employment contract, or that they are self-employed, and also that they never used, that they didn't have not received any social benefits, even allowances for child care or maternity leave over the last year. So the poor families are not anymore allowed to ask for this public housing. And in this, with this changed situation, the structural fund said, okay, we shall help to improve the living conditions of Roma together with the municipality. And after contracting resources from the EU structural funds, the largest real estate companies that bought the municipal houses managed to obtain contracts to repair them and also the infrastructure, because they claimed that they will rent after that these renewed apartments to the poor Roma. They established their own non-governmental organizations to whom they donated few apartments and also give them the possibility to rent several more. And they started to actually absorb this European money. Among these companies is one of the largest property owners in Ostrava, RPG BT Ltd, which used EU funds for repairing and maintenance of housing in the neighborhoods of Liščina, Kunčičke, and Vitkovice. It has its own non-governmental organizations, the biggest one, Centrum. The Toba Trade Ltd, which bought the apartments of the Czech State Railways, gained EU funds to repair and lend them to homeless Roma in previous neighborhood. There is another one, Trimix Majetkova Incorporation, which used EU funds through a project designed for solving the Roma housing problems in Zarubek, and so on and so on. And they also, they are renovating their own property with EU money. They cut a small portion of this housing for to be rented to Roma, but they also gain the rents, because it is from the EU structural funds that the rents of the people living in these housings are paid. And at the same time, a lot of efforts are made to push as many Roma from the city as it is possible. They use for this the fact that Roma are unemployed, and the majority of them also become become homeless because they're pushed out from the houses they rented before, and they threat these people that they will they will take their children and put them in institutions, because this is the law in Czech Republic. This is possible to do with the children of homeless families. So more and more Roma are leaving the town. Well, the Roma non-governmental organizations raise the question, what will happen to the tenants when the project comes to its end and the EU money for rents and social workers' salaries are not available anymore? They're afraid that the real estate companies will terminate their contracts with the Roma families, and only a few dozens of them could enjoy the public housing, those who rent the flats that became NGO's property. So I probably will finish here, but well, actually, when this is shown like the pilot project of how to integrate and how to include Roma people, well, we all feel frustrated. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ilona. This has been an example where under, well, seemingly favorable circumstances and with apparently well-meaning external assistance, this can be very much abused and turned, well, making the situation even worse than before and without such an assistance. And so we have to pay attention to the reality on the spot rather than just looking at some legal rights or some rights existing on paper. We now extend our focus. Well, we have been mostly concerned with European questions, but this morning already some of the more global issues were raised, and Dominique Béchet, who represents an NGO from France, Monde, will tell us about his organization and well, the links, I believe, between our situation here in Europe and well, the broader world.
Je vais parler en français. Donc, je suis permanent depuis longtemps du mouvement international ATD-Quart Monde, qui est un mouvement de lutte contre la grande pauvreté, et on aime bien se présenter comme un mouvement de défense des droits de l'homme, parce que depuis toujours, on fait le lien entre grande pauvreté et violation des droits de l'homme. Et je le cite comme ça, le mouvement ATD-Quart Monde est à l'origine de cette journée du 17 octobre, dont vous avez peut-être entendu parler, la journée mondiale du refus de la misère, dont la phrase qui donne le sens de cette journée est « Là où des hommes sont condamnés à vivre dans la misère, les droits de l'homme sont violés. S'unir pour les faire respecter est un devoir sacré. » Donc une phrase de Joseph Wrezinski, qui est le fondateur de notre mouvement. Et je pense que tout ce qu'on est en train de vivre aujourd'hui, tout ce qu'on vient d'entendre, on est tout à fait dans cet esprit justement de dénoncer des violations des droits de l'homme et de s'unir pour les faire respecter. J'ai faim dans ma tête, pas seulement dans le ventre. C'est une faim de formation, d'avenir. C'est la faim d'avoir une place dans la société où les plus pauvres ne sont pas les bienvenus. Nous voulons apporter notre contribution à cette société. Cette faim que nous avons dans la tête doit être apaisée. Ce n'est pas seulement la bouche des pauvres qu'il faut nourrir. Ça, c'est Nelly Schenker, une femme qui vit la grande pauvreté en Suisse, qui a eu l'occasion de s'exprimer dans une table ronde au niveau national suisse, une table ronde sur la lutte contre la grande pauvreté, où elle s'exprimait au nom d'autres personnes. Il faudrait nous demander à nous qui avons la vie difficile comment bâtir une Europe pour tous les êtres humains, car nous connaissons nos réalités et l'impact de la crise dans notre vie de tous les jours. Pour nous, il est très important d'être reconnus par les politiques pour que soient reconnues nos idées, mais aussi nos besoins. Ça, c'est Astrid, une femme aussi de la grande pauvreté du Luxembourg. Voilà, Luxembourg, on pense que c'est un pays riche, mais il y a aussi des pauvres. Voilà. Et je trouve que Astrid et Nelly disent combien, dans la grande pauvreté, le plus terrible, c'est bien sûr d'avoir de mauvais logements, de ne pas pouvoir se nourrir, etc. Mais c'est surtout d'être considérés comme des inutiles, d'être réduits uniquement à des êtres qu'il faut abriter, nourrir, soigner, voire éduquer. La société pense que parce que tu es pauvre, tu ne peux pas contribuer. Tu n'as rien à dire, tu n'as rien à nous apprendre. Et ça, évidemment, on s'inscrit en faux contre ça. Donc voilà, je m'appuie sur ce que disent Astrid et Nelly, mais on peut s'appuyer aussi sur des textes. Bon, je n'ai pas encore eu l'occasion de lire le guide qui nous a été donné ce matin, mais je vais m'inspirer d'un autre texte qui est les principes directeurs. Je ne sais pas si vous avez entendu parler, qui a été... Donc les principes directeurs sur l'extrême pauvreté et les droits de l'homme, qui a été adopté par la Commission des droits de l'homme de l'ONU le 20 décembre 2012, d'ailleurs qui était fort porté par Magdalena Sepulveda qui est intervenue ce matin, et qui affirme que le développement économique à lui seul ne détruira pas l'extrême pauvreté, et qui dit que les personnes qui vivent dans l'extrême pauvreté ne sont pas seulement des victimes passives, mais ce sont des gens qui doivent être reconnus comme des personnes qui ont des droits et comme des personnes qui sont actrices de changement, qui bougent dans leur communauté, là où elles sont, qui essayent. Et on a entendu ce qu'on nous a dit tout à l'heure de ces femmes en Grande-Bretagne. Et dans l'article 38 de ces principes directeurs, on lit « Les États doivent assurer la participation active, libre, éclairée et constructive des personnes vivant dans la pauvreté à toutes les étapes de la conception, de la mise en œuvre, du suivi et de l'évaluation des décisions et des politiques qui les concernent. C'est quand même pas rien. Un texte est adopté par les États aux Nations Unies. À nous de faire maintenant que ce ne reste pas que des intentions. Alors, je vais donner quelques exemples rapidement parce que le temps passe vite. Mais à Verviers, en Belgique, des parents qui ont leurs enfants placés et qui ont donc les liens avec eux qui sont coupés, ils font tout un travail pour montrer combien les liens avec leurs enfants sont absolument essentiels pour eux, mais aussi pour permettre à leurs enfants de grandir dignement dans l'amour parental. Et ce travail a pour but d'essayer de s'opposer à un projet de loi qui tend à réactiver la notion d'abandon. Et on dit qu'il y a abandon quand il y a un désintérêt manifeste des parents à l'égard des enfants. Et on dit qu'il y a un désintérêt manifeste s'il n'y a pas assez de visites, si les parents ne répondent pas au courrier. Mais quelquefois, les visites, quand on n'a pas les moyens de circuler, quand les enfants sont placés à l'autre bout du pays, voire même dans un autre pays, quand ces visites ont lieu une fois par mois et que ça ne dure qu'une heure, quand elles ont lieu toujours en présence d'une tierce personne, quand souvent les parents sont dénigrés auprès de leurs enfants par les personnes qui en ont la charge, ces visites deviennent extrêmement difficiles, évidemment, vous le mesurez bien. Donc, tout leur travail de ce groupe de familles consiste à dire la réalité de leur vécu, à mettre ensemble des réalités vécues individuellement, mettre ensemble des histoires vécues individuellement et même intimement, parce qu'on parle de sa famille, on parle de son intimité avec son enfant qu'on n'a plus. Et on le fait pour en faire une parole collective qui pourra soutenir toutes les familles en Belgique qui vivent la même situation. Et ce travail, il se fait dans le prolongement d'une initiative de dialogue et de concertation qui continue, qui s'appelait Agora, au sein de la communauté française de Belgique, qui permettait à des fonctionnaires du service de l'aide à la jeunesse et des représentants de familles très pauvres de réfléchir ensemble, de travailler ensemble sur un décret relatif à l'aide à la jeunesse. Et tout un travail qui a abouti à ce que, par exemple, les parents qui ont leurs enfants placés aient accès à leurs dossiers. Ce qui oblige les travailleurs sociaux à écrire autrement dans ces dossiers. Évidemment, si on sait que les parents vont lire, on va écrire complètement différemment. Mais je veux dire que ça crée une confiance. Et là, du coup, les plus pauvres ne sont pas vus seulement comme des personnes à aider, mais elles sont reconnues comme ayant une connaissance et un avis à apporter. À Londres, on y a été tout à l'heure, on a aussi tout un projet qu'on appelle Giving Poverty a Voice, en lien avec d'autres organisations, et je trouve qu'on devrait se mettre en lien avec vous. L'objectif de ce projet est d'aider les gens vivant en situation de pauvreté à accroître leur participation au processus décisionnel local et de leur permettre d'avoir une réelle implication dans l'élaboration des politiques et des pratiques qui les concernent. Et on me racontait récemment qu'à Londres, il y a un projet, en Angleterre, il y a un projet de loi qui réduirait, à cause de la crise, qui réduirait les prestations pour les gens qui ne travaillent pas, donc pour les très pauvres. C'est-à-dire, vous aurez des prestations pour 2 enfants. Et si vous avez plus de 2 enfants, si j'ai bien compris, si vous avez plus de 2 enfants, tant pis pour vous. C'est-à-dire que si vous avez 5 ou 6 enfants, vous n'aurez des allocations que pour 2 enfants. Vous vous démerdez pour le reste. C'est-à-dire que les gens vont perdre leur logement, ils vont perdre... Et donc, comme ils vont perdre leur logement, on va les accuser de maltraitance envers leurs enfants qui vont être mis en adoption, etc. Et donc, on veut réagir à ça. Et une participante à cet atelier dit « C'est pas facile de se lever dans une salle pleine de députés. Mais si on ne leur dit pas notre réalité, comment marche, qu'est-ce qui ne marche pas dans le système, jamais ils pourront le deviner. Il faut que ce soit nous qui leur disions. » En France, ils viennent de terminer, il y a eu tout un travail, ils se sont posé la question, qu'est-ce qu'il faudrait mettre en œuvre pour que tous les enfants réussissent à l'école? On peut dire qu'en France, tous les enfants vont à l'école, quasiment tous. Mais ce n'est pas pour ça qu'ils apprennent à l'école. Et si on va à l'école, c'est pour apprendre. Et donc pour ça, le mouvement ATD-Quart Monde a mobilisé des représentants des différents syndicats d'enseignants, des syndicats, pour ceux qui connaissent la France, très opposés, voilà, des syndicats d'enseignants de l'enseignement privé, avec des syndicats des enseignements publics et durs, avec des associations de parents d'élèves, et aussi dans les deux extrêmes de l'échiquier politique, et aussi avec des représentants des courants pédagogiques, mais aussi avec des parents dont les enfants étaient en difficulté à l'école, et aussi avec des parents solidaires, parce que c'est clair que seuls les parents ne peuvent pas s'en sortir, il faut qu'il y ait des parents solidaires à leur côté. Donc des personnes qui n'avaient pas l'habitude de travailler ensemble, ni de s'écouter, ni de bâtir ensemble, etc. Et une participante à ce processus, qui était donc quelqu'un d'un courant pédagogique, disait « Cette démarche fait politiquement rupture avec des pratiques habituelles, en particulier lorsqu'elles sont motivées par de bonnes intentions ou qu'il s'agit de venir en aide aux pauvres. » Et par cette démarche, ils sont arrivés, c'était avant les élections présidentielles de l'année dernière, à faire des propositions très concrètes avec un accord donc de 12 organisations syndicales, parents d'élèves, des propositions pour une école où tous les enfants puissent apprendre. Donc c'était un véritable travail en croisement des savoirs et des pratiques. La parole de chacun avait la même valeur. Ce n'est pas la parole des plus pauvres qui est meilleure que les autres, mais elle avait la même importance que la parole des enseignants, que la parole des travailleurs sociaux qui ont pu être mêlés à cette affaire, etc. Il a fallu s'écouter, adapter son point de vue à celui de l'autre, chacun enrichissant la parole de l'autre. Voilà. À partir de là, je vais donner rapidement quelques repères. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire, cette participation des plus pauvres? On a beaucoup parlé ce matin du gaspillage. Donc on nous dit qu'il y a 30% des ressources naturelles, 30% de la nourriture qui est produite, qui est jetée. On parle du gaspillage de l'énergie, on parle de... Voilà. Mais il faut aussi parler du gaspillage humain, du gaspillage de l'expérience, du savoir et de l'intelligence des plus pauvres. Les personnes en situation de pauvreté ont une connaissance particulière et unique à cause de leur expérience. Et il faut absolument que la société en tienne compte pour se bâtir avec. Et ça, c'est vraiment ça l'enjeu de la participation des pauvres. Eux, mieux que quiconque, savent ce que signifie vivre dans un mauvais logement. Eux, mieux que quiconque, savent ce que ça veut dire que de voir ses enfants échouer à l'école, que ça veut dire que de voir ses enfants sortir de l'école à 16 ans sans aucun avenir, que d'avoir toujours des petits travaux qui sont méprisés, etc. Eux seuls savent ce que ça veut dire que de subir des réflexions au guichet, ou d'être accusé de se complaire dans la situation, enfin tout ce qu'on a dit depuis ce matin, de ne pas vouloir faire d'efforts, toute cette stigmatisation. Et ça, on doit absolument le comprendre et en tenir compte. Sinon, on se contente de gérer la pauvreté et on ne la détruit pas. Et on maintient, comme on l'a dit ce matin aussi, on maintient ces personnes comme des citoyens de seconde zone. Autre repère, mon Dieu, le temps passe vite. Alors je dis vite, cette participation doit vraiment aller au-delà du recueil du seul témoignage. C'est vraiment une vraie contribution des personnes dont on a besoin. Et voilà, c'est avec elles qu'on doit se bâtir. Donc je passe vite. Je dirais que les personnes en situation de pauvreté, troisième repère, bien sûr qu'ils peuvent apporter des idées sur comment lutter contre la pauvreté, mais ils ont aussi leur mot à dire sur les grands débats qui traversent la société. Sur l'écologie, par exemple, ils ont quelque chose à dire, parce qu'ils en sont les premières victimes du dérèglement climatique. Les premiers, ils ont récupéré pour vivre. Donc maintenant, quand on va leur dire de faire le tri sélectif, ils savent ce que c'est, bien avant nous, parce qu'ils le pratiquaient pour vivre. Donc au niveau de l'écologie, ils ont des choses à nous apprendre aussi. Et je termine par ça, cette participation, évidemment, elle n'est pas magique. D'abord parce que les très pauvres, on ne leur demande jamais leur avis, donc ils n'ont pas l'habitude de leur donner, évidemment. Et elles finissent par croire ce qu'on leur dit, vous n'avez rien à nous dire. Elles finissent par le croire, on leur dit tellement. Et puis elles ne sont pas sûres d'être attendues non plus. Et là, elles ont peut-être raison, on ne les attend pas souvent quand même. Parce que leur participation, elle peut faire peur, elle peut déstabiliser, parce qu'on n'a pas la même logique, parce que leur expression, quelquefois, elle peut être maladroite, parfois même violente, tellement ils en ont marre de ce qu'ils vivent. Et puis, il y a un fossé entre leur logique et celles qui veulent les aider. Une personne qui a participé à un groupe de travail disait « Eux, ils font leur travail, Nous, c'est de notre vie qu'il s'agit. Le fossé. Hein. J'aurais encore des choses à dire, mais il faut arrêter. Merci.
Merci, Dominique. We have heard about a broad spectrum of very concrete experiences in Europe and beyond, and which I think underline what I said in the beginning, namely that there is a paradox between, well, legal procedures being in place, democratic processes being in place, but that the real life situation, at least of, well, different groups, but very seriously affected groups, differs very much from what is guaranteed in the constitutions or similar legal documents. It's certainly much too early to draw any more general conclusions, but from what I heard is that voice is very important for all of them. And if the voice isn't strong enough, we have to scream sometimes, you know, and to make well, the problems known, to make the voices heard, but also to, well, encourage others to listen and to emphasize, to sympathize, and to assist in ways which are meaningful to those concerned and not just in some paternalistic form which may be abused, and you also have seen an example of this. So we now open the floor to more general questions from your side, and I will ask you briefly to introduce yourself, but also to be very brief in your questions. We have about 30-35 minutes altogether for this more general discussion, and then each one of the panel participants will have a chance to briefly react from her or his own point of view. So I open the floor. Yes. And we collect maybe 3 or 4 questions, and if they are directly directed to certain persons on the panel, these persons will answer. So I start 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Next round.
Hello. Loud enough? Perfect, thank you. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm Saïd Asnaoui. I'm just a simple citizen living in Strasbourg. And I will speak in French, je vais parler en français. Comment les voix des personnes en situation de pauvreté peuvent-elles influencer le processus démocratique? C'est le titre de la discussion que nous avons en ce moment. Mais je pense que la réflexion au départ sur la définition de la démocratie était vraiment pertinente. Parce qu'au fond, ce qu'on s'aperçoit aujourd'hui, c'est depuis une trentaine, une quarantaine d'années, les leviers de pouvoir qui avant étaient détenus à une échelle sociétale, politique, sont de plus en plus détenus dans la sphère privée. C'est-à-dire que la démocratie, c'est la décision prise par le peuple dans sa globalité. Mais lorsque je vais dans mon entreprise, par exemple, pour travailler, mon entreprise est régie sur des décisions qui ne sont pas des décisions qui sont démocratiques. C'est des décisions qui appartiennent à des personnes privées en tant que telles. Et donc, la véritable question déjà à poser en profondeur, à mon avis, c'est de la définition de la démocratie. Est-ce que la démocratie, c'est simplement l'institution qui nous représente, ou est-ce que ça va bien au-delà de ça? Et aujourd'hui, avec en effet le glissement des leviers de pouvoir vers la société privée, est-ce qu'on n'est pas de plus en plus dans une société dans laquelle on ne maîtrise pas réellement les décisions qui sont prises? Est-ce que nos pouvoirs, est-ce que nos gouvernements sont réellement en mesure de changer les choses en profondeur, dans la mesure où les pouvoirs financiers et les pouvoirs publics ont de plus en plus de poids dans le fonctionnement des institutions? Ce qui m'amène en fait à une proposition qui a émané ce matin dans les réflexions, c'est-à-dire qu'en réalité, pour pouvoir permettre à personne d'avoir un revenu minimal, je pense qu'il faut placer la discussion non pas dans un cadre européen, mais vraiment dans un cadre qui soit un cadre mondial, dans la mesure où il y a 35 000 personnes tous les jours qui meurent du manque d'accès à la nourriture, il y a 10 000 personnes qui meurent du manque d'accès à l'eau potable, et on produit assez de nourriture pour 12 milliards d'individus, mais on n'est que 7 milliards sur la planète, il y a 2 milliards d'individus qui ne mangent pas suffisamment à leur faim à l'échelle de la planète. planète. Donc il y a un véritable problème aujourd'hui économique, et la véritable crise économique, c'est pas la crise économique telle qu'on peut la voir avec les dettes des États. La véritable crise économique, c'est quand la ressource ne rencontre pas le besoin. Et la ressource, elle est immense, les besoins, ils sont présents, mais si on n'a pas d'argent pour accéder à la ressource, eh bien, on meurt, on est dans la grande pauvreté. Et donc ça m'amène à une proposition. Et la proposition est la suivante, c'est que pourquoi ne pas créer une banque sociale mondiale qui serait financée justement par exemple par une taxe sur les capitaux financiers. Et en effet, on a aujourd'hui le problème que les populations dans les pays du Sud ne peuvent pas avoir accès directement à l'aide publique parce qu'elle est souvent détournée. Mais pourquoi pas créer une forme de citoyenneté mondiale? Pourquoi ne pas faire en sorte que chacun puisse avoir une espèce de carte d'identité mondiale sous la bannière de l'Organisation des Nations Unies? Et ce serait une carte d'identité qui serait également une carte bancaire quelque part. Et que le revenu minimal, sous l'égide d'une organisation internationale qui pourrait être l'ONU, mais qui pourrait également être une autre, pourrait être viré directement sur un compte en banque que chacun pourrait avoir à l'échelle de la planète. Et donc, on aurait une citoyenneté qui serait universelle parmi les États membres de cette organisation universelle. Et donc, on pourrait chacun, tous les mois, selon les besoins spécifiques de l'État, avoir accès à un revenu minimal. Ce revenu minimal qui permettrait d'accéder aux besoins fondamentaux en termes d'accès à la nourriture. Une autre partie des fonds qui seraient collectés par ce fonds mondial pourrait servir à des développements structurels, d'infrastructures, pour l'accès à l'eau potable ou alors pour les questions de... Ah, pardon. Voilà, j'ai fini. Pour les questions de transport de la nourriture depuis le champ vers les personnes qui en ont besoin. Voilà, je vous remercie.
Thank you for your assistance in sharing the session. You are the next one.
Hi everybody, I'm Nicolas, I'm French. I will try to make the effort to speak in English, so sorry for my fault. I just talked to an observation about Ternura. You said we asked the question if we are in a democracy. We are in an imperfect democracy, but for myself, I prefer to be in an imperfect democracy than in a perfect dictatorship. So ask the question. I think it's a very, very bad observation you make. I was former Indignados too, and you asked the question, how could we make participate the people to the debate in politics? I think everybody here is making mistakes. The non-monetized people, I don't like the term poor, are participate to the political system in electoral views, because you see the phenomena of extreme right in Europe. It's a large part of persons who are declassified socially. So my question is that how could we struggle, it's not the debate, but how could we struggle the extreme right, that's my special opinion, to in Europe, because our democracy are in danger with these people. Thank you to listen to me.
Hello, I'm Christina from Greece. Before I ask a question to Rune Herlin from Denmark, I would like to say, no, we don't have a democracy, and there is no real democracy everywhere in the world. And I say that because I face this every day in my life in Greece, in Athens, and I saw the worst face of democracy when I had to run for my life. So I want to ask Rune, you said that you made these local councils. I think that this is really, really great. But you live in Denmark. How is this possible to be done in Greece, in a city where we have a lot of buildings that they are, you know, without people in it, they are just there. But the government wants to sell these buildings and to enterprises and companies, so they don't let us take them and use them for the right reason. So, in your opinion, what should we do so that we push in this direction? Thank you.
Okay, and we have one last,
Yes. Thank you. Reka Tunyagi from Eurochild. I'm representing a European network of organizations working for children and young people throughout Europe. We have members from all over Europe working on children's rights and child well-being. And I would like to add a point to children's participation. All of the challenges you have mentioned before are equally relevant for children's participation, and I would like to add one more, that it's difficult for them to be taken seriously as well. And the rights of all children to be heard are incorporated in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which all EU member states have signed and ratified, so they are bound to implement that, but it's another question how they do that. And children have to be empowered and involved in decision-making, not only for their own benefits, but also to improve service provision and the quality of the services provided to them. And what we have seen through our membership is that cuts are affecting their capacity to involve children. And what would be needed instead is a culture to be built on meaningful involvement of children in decision-making, because experiencing social exclusion, poverty, and inequality can have serious impact on children's personal development. So we have done some work gathering inspiring practices on how to involve children from disadvantaged background with the right kind of support in a meaningful way and in the conditions of their own lives, but which also benefits social life for all. So I would like to ask the panel members, what is your experience in involving children and how you feel about this? Thank you.
Two more direct questions, and the others were more comments, which are always interesting, and also some concrete proposals. We cannot discuss them in detail. We just, if you have some ideas to contribute, it's fine, but we cannot, go into any details proposed here. So I would give the floor to Rune, because he was addressed very directly.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the very direct question. Of course, you're right. Denmark and Greece, as things are now, cannot be compared. You're perfectly right. So my answer to you is that you have to find your own way in Greece to to giving voice and pooling needs and interest. But and back to your very specific questions regarding housing. What are you to do? I talked to another participant of this conference. Actually, he's sitting in the back row there. He mentioned the idea of squatting. I know it's it can be militant, but I guess if you have to go to the extreme, that could be one way of doing it. Hopefully, there's some less militant initiatives before that. But you're the best one to answer that.
Not really. Others want also to talk. And well, there was a question of the definition of democracy, which I think is very essential for our discussion. And very briefly, I don't want to give a lecture here, but it's important to keep in mind that democracy is not just about elections. Democracy is about basic human rights. It's about the rule of law to enforce such human rights. And we have seen that at least the possibility to raise your voice and to enforce such human rights is not given in the same way in all of our countries. But I would not share the view that there is no somewhat better or so much worse democracy in the world. I would plead for some differentiation according to, the specific circumstances. There are some badly governed democracies, and I think you come from a country where you can show this. If you talk about Berlusconi's Italy, would be another case, and there are some other countries which are better governed. So in this respect, I think we also should differentiate between the possibilities which actually exist on the spot.
Could I respond on the child?
Yes.
I just wanted to respond to the sister who raised about the UN Convention on Children. We have a great deal of experience of how, in fact, the UK government circumvents that convention, beginning with the detention of children. Jeto mentioned Yarlswood Immigration Detention Centre. For years, families were held there. Children who had been taken out of communities and put into detention centres, supposedly for short periods of time before being removed. But the reality was that they were being held there for long periods of time and being very, very traumatised by that experience. And when the coalition government said that they were going to stop the detention of children, that was a very clever lie, because in fact what they did is they simply moved it somewhere else. They co-opted Indignados, which is one of the children's charities, and Indignados took over the role of detaining children in a supposedly nicer place. And, you know, there's a long history of NGOs and others, charities, getting involved with implementing government policy. And that's always been a way in which, if you privatize or give the role to somebody else, the government can get completely off the hook and not be held at all responsible for it. So there has been, you know, public action by concerned individuals against that co-opting of NGOs and collaboration of NGOs with others. So, you know, I think we have to, there are many, many statutes that are supposed to protect us. You know, rape is meant to be torture and therefore grounds for asylum. But virtually every woman that we've ever supported to make that asylum claim has been told, no, either we don't believe you were raped, or you were raped, but it wasn't you they were after somebody else, or it's safe you were raped and it's safe for you to go back. So there are many ways in which whatever statutes we have to use really become problematic because we cannot get them implemented. So we question the use of the statutes, and it comes down to the fact that people doing it for themselves is what changes things and is what wins in the end. There are more individual people winning their struggles and battle than any of the groups, any of us groups working with them. And I think that needs to be looked at, and especially in relation to the man that said, you know, I think it was you, sir, you raised about your point. No, not you, sir, the other sir. Yeah, you raised the point about what people are doing.
I said, I explained, in our democracy, is it acceptable to accept some party or some organization who are accredited some ID from some negationism or some racism? And I take obdoré, I don't the English word in Greece, so obdoré in Greece or FN in France, or is it tolerable for our democracy to accept this one? Because we observe that the crisis riding the gap electorally, this form of party, so must we tolerate them or forbidden them? That's my question.
Well, we vote and the government gets in. That's my answer. Well, if we do something else
I'm sorry,
together,
we cannot continue that kind of bilateral discussion.
Sorry.
But Dominique wanted to react to the same question very briefly, and then we have some 10
secondes par rapport à la Convention des droits de l'enfant. Je parlais tout à l'heure du placement des enfants. Quelquefois, on s'appuie sur la Convention internationale des droits de l'enfant pour protéger les enfants, et pour cela, pour protéger les enfants, on les place, on les sépare de leur famille. Et je veux dire qu'il ne faut pas séparer les droits de l'enfant du droit de la famille. Surtout, nous, on ne doit absolument pas l'oublier. C'est tout ce que je voulais rajouter.
Now I have 3 more persons on my list. You here, then you, and then behind. Yes. Utilisez le micro.
Oui, je suis de Portugal. Je vais faire une question, je pense, à Dominique Béchet. Je vais essayer d'expliquer. Je suis assistante sociale et j'ai étudié après ma PhD en économie. Et je travaille maintenant avec les réseaux sociaux municipalité au Portugal. Et je crois que je sais que le rôle d'animation pour créer les liens est très important, ce qui est j'ai vu dans votre biographie. Alors, ma question est, j'ai construit dans mon PhD un index sur la capacité des personnes pour construire son propre process de empowerment. I don't know le mot en français. Alors, 3 axes qui sont très importants, la motivation, les compétences et les opportunités. Alors, pour moi, les opportunités sont les moments où on crée, on anime, où on peut participer, alors on développe les processus démocratiques parce qu'on participe. Et ma question est si vous connaissez des études sur cette question, si vous connaissez des études sur cette question, parce que ma recherche est faite surtout dans des régions de Portugal et du Brésil et maintenant l'Andalousie. J'aimerais aussi connaître d'autres études sur cette question de la création d'opportunités de développement, mais d'empowerment. I don't know le même mot en français ou en portugais, mais comme les communautés qui se développent par eux-mêmes. Alors, comme les personnes, je me développe par moi-même aussi. J'aimerais aussi connaître d'autres études, d'autres recherches, peut-être, si on peut après connaître.
Merci.
Merci bien. Ik zit wel met een vertaalprobleem, dus ik weet niet of de vertalers Nederland kunnen omzetten in Engels. Okay. Ik kan alleen maar even Nederlands. Ik ga het in Nederlands proberen.
There is no translation.
I can translate in English.
Ja, speak. Nee, dan moet je hier komen. Dan moet je deze... Speak. Ja. Ik heb een... ik ga even kort vertellen wat wij in Nederland doen.
You will talk briefly on what we do in Holland.
Ja, met name Amsterdam, want Nederland mag hier natuurlijk niet uitblijven.
And exactly about Amsterdam, not just the whole of Holland.
En ik heb maar een klein dingetje, ik wil een voorstel doen.
I have a small thing I would like to do. I have a proposal.
Ja, en alle beetjes helpen natuurlijk.
All little things helps.
Ik wil elk jaar, en daar moeten jullie gewoon bij helpen, de EU moet dat ook doen, de burgemeester van het jaar uit te kiezen.
It's good to take the mayor of the year.
Ja, de burgemeester of politicus voor het jaar.
Or the political person of the year.
Die zich het meest heeft ingezet en begaan is met dak- en thuislozen en andere mensen.
Who has done a lot for homeless people.
Ja, en deze burgemeester of politicus moet dan een bewijs van goed gedrag krijgen en dat is symbolisch.
And this mayor or political person have to have what you say? He has to have a reason that he behaved himself well that year.
En wat je hiermee bereikt, dat de dak- en thuislozen onder de aandacht komen en dat je andere burgemeesters en politicus hiermee stimuleert.
With this you can get the attention of, you can make sure that the homeless people are being heard. And what else?
Dat je andere politicus en burgemeesters hiermee stimuleert.
And you can stimulate other mayors and political person with this.
Nou, de eerste pluim die geef ik zelf aan onze burgemeester van Amsterdam, Eberhard van der Laan.
The first example is our mayor of Amsterdam, Eberhard van der Laan.
Deze burgemeester, Amsterdam is een wereldstad, weet u, die is beschermheer van dak- en thuislozen geworden.
This mayor is, Amsterdam is a world city, and this mayor of Amsterdam is he supports the homeless people in Amsterdam. The organization DAC.
Ja, hij gaat naar vrijwel alle feestjes van dak- en thuislozen.
He goes to all the parties and New Year's reception of the homeless.
En hij is begonnen met het minder uitschrijven van boetes aan dak- en thuislozen.
And he started with giving out lesser fines to homeless and people who live on the street.
Wegens dat.
This seems to be a very positive example, but we cannot take too much time on it. Do you have any concrete question?
Ik ben klaar, ja. Ik wil alleen zeggen van, dat hij dus minder boetes uit gaat schrijven naar een thuisloze en hij ondersteunt ze dus. Misschien is het een leuk idee om dat in het leven te roepen.
Yeah, he supports the homeless people, and one example he gave on the reception is that we asked him for this organization has been doing receptions for 15 years, New Year's reception, if he can help them to become a legal foundation, and he said yes, I will give the 500 or 600 euro. That is necessary to make you legal.
Okay, thank you for your contribution.
Je parlerai en français, puisque dans cette maison, on parle officiellement le français et l'anglais. Mais mettez vos micros, parce que sinon les traducteurs ne pourront pas l'entendre. Oui, Durand Berger, association européenne des institutions d'éducation non formelle des enfants et des jeunes. Je fais partie de la conférence des ONG, qui a sa place ici, dans le Conseil de l'Europe, et depuis pas mal de temps, puisque c'est la seule instance internationale qui prend en compte les ONG au niveau participatif. Ceci étant dit, je ne veux pas faire un cours sur les institutions européennes, mais je reviendrai sur la situation de pauvreté et le processus démocratique. Je me pose un peu la question, le processus démocratique, il faut d'abord le connaître, le processus démocratique. Il y a beaucoup de textes, etc. Et je ferai quelques remarques. Tout à l'heure, j'ai entendu les intervenants que je trouvais fort intéressants, et je les remercie, parce que les exemples qu'ils donnaient pouvaient bien illustrer un certain nombre, disons, de situations qu'on peut, je ne veux pas dire globaliser, mais dont on peut en tirer un certain nombre, disons, de leçons. J'ai entendu le mot qui a été utilisé, à condition qu'on connaisse les droits. Il y en a d'autres qui diraient qu'il faut s'occuper, disons, des gens. Une autre expression, il faut qu'ils donnent leur avis. Et puis, il y a aussi se faire entendre à travers les élections. Et ça a été dit, d'ailleurs, ce n'est pas uniquement les élections. La participation, elle est beaucoup plus large, à condition qu'on sache l'utiliser. Et là, je reviens un tout petit peu aux ONG et aux ONG. Je crois que c'est important, disons, de mobiliser effectivement les ONG dans la lutte contre l'exclusion et surtout la pauvreté, et œuvrer à inclure dans la société les citoyens par la reconnaissance et aussi par l'exercice, disons, de leurs droits. En janvier, j'abrège très rapidement par rapport à... En janvier, la conférence des ONG a pris une déclaration, une résolution pour une réduction des inégalités liées à la paupérisation au sein des démocraties européennes. Vous trouverez le texte d'ailleurs avec une annexe qui a été rédigée par le Réseau européen pour l'exclusion et l'action sociale. Et je crois qu'on trouve déjà, et à travers d'ailleurs le guide, j'ai retrouvé un certain nombre, disons, d'éléments. Vous trouverez d'ailleurs devant l'hémicycle, vous trouverez peut-être le texte. Je n'ai pas une publicité que je fais, mais je crois qu'il y a des instances qui travaillent effectivement, mais qui ne travaillent pas uniquement ici. Ça, c'est facile peut-être de le faire, mais il s'agit aussi, disons, d'articuler ça sur le travail, sur le terrain, et puis accompagner cette action sociale à travers la solidarité, parce que c'est sur la proximité qu'il y a peut-être le plus d'efficacité. Et il faut quand même se dire, est-ce qu'on connaît effectivement tous ces textes, comme la charte sociale révisée, les conventions, est-ce qu'on connaît tous ces textes-là? Et je crois que là, on a un travail à faire, nous, au niveau des associations, des ONG, des groupes, comme les conseils qui ont été évoqués, à intervenir auprès, disons, des gens et à leur donner, disons, des éléments pour qu'ils puissent connaître leurs droits. Merci.
Merci pour votre conseil. I have two more persons on my list from Well, three actually. Well, you and you and you. Then we have to conclude. I'm sorry. So you start.
Yes. Mary Margaret Hayes from Ireland. I'm here on behalf of IFHE, but I'm speaking in terms of an association, a charity in Ireland called St. Vincent de Paul, which many of you already have heard of because it is worldwide. It's in Portugal, in other European countries, in India, in Australia. My point is that I come from a country that actually had a government who single-handedly went and took a bailout and without any democratic vote as such. And there is just an interesting sociological thing that I'd like to comment about. First of all, the people in the country that are civil servants, teachers, nurses, and so on, have all had their salaries cut by about 1/3 in order to pay for the money the bailout is going to cost us. They resent that very much. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, the St. Vincent de Paul Society, even as we are sitting here today, are dealing with the most dreadful things in Ireland. On the face of it, it looks as if Ireland is very, very fairly well off. Nice houses and so on. But if you go inside the door of some of those houses, the families do not have food. They do not have money to turn central heating on. And so they turn to the St. Vincent de Paul because there is a stigma in signing on for social welfare and so on. In other words, much of what has been said today at this conference can be concentrated into the Irish experience. Furthermore, we're an island at the very extreme of Europe, so it's even more difficult for us. And St. Vincent de Paul has seen an increase of 104% of aid demands since 2009. The interesting sociological aspect that I want to bring up is that, having said that we resent having paid for the bailout, St. Vincent de Paul have not run out of money because the Irish people have been supplying those that can, and people make sacrifices to supply money to it as well. So they're not asked to, but they do it. And I think the reason they do it is because they feel it's local. They have ownership of the association. It's a national association. They look on the bailout debt as being a foreign European sort of thing that really they should have had a choice about. So finally, my final point is that I asked on Saturday, I spent the day with the past president of St. Vincent de Paul Society, and she told me that the reason nobody is here belong to St. Vincent de Paul is they're too busy working on the ground, and that solutions don't always come from forums like this, but from needs that they see on the ground as such. So basically, that's all I want to say. And I do think that you have put a lot into this conference, and thank you very much to all the speakers. But I had to bring up about the Irish situation because I have been to another conference elsewhere, and it has even been missing from statistical charts on the poverty issue. So I had to bring it up. Thank you.
Please, I have two more speakers. Please try to be as brief as possible.
Thank you, Chairman. By coincidence, I'm also from Ireland, but we weren't connected in terms of what we're about to say. But just to perhaps complement, I can be more brief because of the previous intervention about the situation in Ireland. It arose out of the fact that we had a property bubble and a banking collapse and whatever, and there'd be arguments as to whether we had any real choice but to seek outside help. I would believe to think that we didn't have a choice. But the reason I'm intervening really is, and it's a real question, a real concern. I work, for example, I'm a retired civil servant, but I work for an advocacy initiative which is trying to help civil society perhaps become more effective in advocating for change and so on. And we've done some work. We have a website reference, advocacyinitiative.ie, if you're interested in looking at what we're doing. But what has emerged, as far as I'm concerned, is a kind of the economic orthodoxy that's out there, which makes it difficult sometimes to advocate for change. And in the situation we're in, we see the economic orthodoxy very, very clearly, because it's dictated to us by what we call in Ireland the Troika, which is the European Commission, European Central Bank and the IMF. And there's three dimensions to it. One is we need to be more competitive. So as a country, we need to be more competitive. What that actually means in practice is that wages, salaries, occupational benefits, allowances, and so on, last speaker mentioned those, have to be cut and cut back severely. Social benefits, the social wage right across the board also have to be cut and have been cut quite significantly. And on the other hand, we have a lower capital gains tax. That's to attract investment and to attract particularly foreign investment. And you may have read about the fact that some of the big multinationals are taking advantage of what's occurring in this regard by ending up paying very little tax anywhere. But that's just an example of how we're becoming more competitive. Then, of course, there's advocated that we have more consumption. Despite the fact that people are being told that private debt is a major problem, please spend more so we can get the economy back operating well again. And people obviously want to pay down their debt, and therefore consumption is low. So as a result of this, it's almost as if inequality and poverty are built into the system, into the process, that no matter what you do, this is going to happen. And somebody showed a picture of a maze this morning, if you remember one of the pictures that were shown up on the system, and I think it's a bit like in a maze. You walk into it, and how do you get out of it? And when we go to policymakers, we're told, please, we've heard all the problems, we know the problems, please come with solutions. And that's the problem with advocacy. What are the solutions? How can you somehow or another within that maze set down for us by the economic policy that seems to be absolutely necessary? How can we find ways out of that maze into the society that we all want to have, which is one of greater equality, eradicating poverty and so on? And I'd like to ask the speakers if they found a way out of the maze. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, democracy is also about having rules, and I'm the one who has to enforce such rules. So I have one last intervention here.
Avec plusieurs associations caritatives sur Mulhouse, nous avons obtenu les droits aux soins pour les gens en précarité. On a travaillé 2 ans dessus. Les gens peuvent avoir les lunettes, les appareils auditifs et les dents gratuitement. En pensionnant, on a fait plusieurs formations avec la sécurité sociale, en sachant exactement les droits que les gens ils ont et qui ne sont pas informés. Donc, nous, on va taper et on va sur le terrain et on divulgue ce dont les gens ils ont le droit. Comme par exemple, un enfant qui est scolarisé a le droit, 1 fois par an, monture et les bergs gratuitement. Il a le droit à la cantine gratuite le midi s'il a trop loin pour se déplacer. Donc, je dis, c'est aux gens, déjà, avec les élus. D'ailleurs, c'est depuis qu'il y a 2 ans, on a signé la charte à Mulhouse, qu'on appelle le déblocage pour la sécurité sociale. Et maintenant, on va encore plus loin sur les logements et sur l'immigration.
Thank you. We now have a final round. No, sorry. Time is up, almost. But those members on the panel who want to react to one or the other intervention now have a very brief chance to do so, but you needn't feel obliged to do so, just if you have something to say. So I start with Dominique on my left. No? Yes.
Je ne vais pas répondre maintenant à Madame, on va répondre plus tard dans les couloirs. Non, je veux seulement rebondir sur ce que disait la Madame d'Irlande, qui disait que ce n'est pas dans un lieu comme ici qu'on fait avancer les choses, c'est sur le terrain par l'action concrète. Elle a raison, mais on a aussi besoin de lieux comme ici où on peut faire entendre quand même notre combat, quand même le fait qu'on soit ensemble. Déjà, je trouve que c'est important. Des rassemblements comme aujourd'hui sont aussi importants. Mais ce n'est pas tout, vous avez raison, complètement raison. Et si on est ici, c'est parce que derrière nous, il y a notre pratique. On a bien entendu, voilà, nous ici, mais vous aussi dans la salle, on a chacun notre pratique. Et puis derrière nous, il y a plein de gens qui ont aussi une pratique sur le terrain.
Okay, very briefly, a practical solution which I didn't raise, which was we really want to see sanctions against the governments that refuse to implement laws, proper sanctions, whereby the price is paid for what we don't get. And secondly, just on the question of the basic income and the movement for it, I mean, we've been supporting that since 1995, but from a slightly different perspective, which is to press for payment for caring work, so that mothers, single mothers who want to be at home caring for their children actually get a wage for that, so that unwaged work is quantified and valued in every GNP of every country, and therefore it will show that women are doing 2/3 of the world's work for 10% of the income. We can address that sexism at a stroke by paying for it. Thank you.
I would like to say just 2 sentences, and these are the proposals of the people in poverty from different ethnic minorities with whom I have worked. Well, and I think that they speak on behalf of all those who suffer poverty and inequality. Well, their suggestions are simple like this. They say whenever there are projects for eradication of poverty among certain group, let at least 1/3 of the working places be occupied from the members of this group, and let this rule become obligatory for all the projects that are funded with European Union money, because otherwise it will be paternalism. Someone will do something for people who are excluded, and they will not participate in it. And the other simple proposal they have is let the organizations of the people in difficult situation be involved at least in the monitoring process if they are not involved when decisions are made or in the implementation process. This also is a way to say yes or no on what is done for the group, for the vulnerable group. Thank you.
Well, I would like to close with 3 things. Well, there are many things that we can do to, take people out of poverty and make them participate, but they are in a hurry. They can't wait for us to change the system. So I think the solution would be a parallel social economy that is rising with time banks and with barter or alternative currencies and things that we all know. So that would be some kind of solution, not the solution. Please pay attention to something that is called quod omnes tangit. That's Latin for a law that is being recovered back from the medieval times. It's going to be officially presented at the World Social Forum in Tunis in next March. They say that we don't have a way out, but it's there. And it's something that was, recovered from our history of humanity. So you are going to see it. We are all going to be able to participate if we want to. And now, to finish, let's make an exercise, how we are going to participate. Please, those who want to, do with me this exercise. Put this finger here, then this finger here, show me your hand, then this finger here, and this finger here. Once again, little finger, other finger, this one, this one. Okay, there's been a connection between myself and 7, 8 other people in this room out from, how many are we? So when a person says something, very little people is going to listen because there is not that connection that we need. So please try to find ways in everything you do to make people do this, all of them, okay? Thank you.
Well, thank you all, most of all the panelists, but everyone in the room to have come to this workshop. I think we shared a number of different views, a number of different experiences, but we've also seen some new or fresh ideas and some concrete proposals or some positive examples to follow. And so in this respect, I think the conference as such is an important means to have such contacts and to raise our voices. Thank you.